Baltic Sea, October 15, 2025. A U.S. destroyer cuts through the waves during a routine NATO patrol, but from 300 miles above the KH-11 satellite detects an approaching threat. Suddenly, Russian fighter jets swoop over the ship's deck at just 100 feet in a simulated attack, triggering the ship's advanced Aegis kill chain. As the alarm sounded in the combat center, the real question arose with the automatic kill chains ready to fire. Would this be a testament to American restraint, or the fuse igniting a large-scale conflict in the Baltic Sea? In international waters of the Baltic Sea, the guided missile destroyer USS Donald Cook, DDG-75, was conducting a routine presence mission. The Arleigh Burke Flight 2A class ship was moving at a steady speed of 20 knots. This is a vital maritime artery through which more than 20% of Europe's liquefied natural gas (LNG) passes. All activities on the ship, from the command bridge to the engine room, operate as a single mechanism, strictly adhering to combat procedures demonstrating precision and iron discipline. On the aft deck, an MH-60R Seahawk helicopter is refueling. Its main rotor spins steadily at 300 revolutions per minute, creating a strong but controlled airflow. The pilot maintains the aircraft at a stable altitude of 500 feet above ground level, strictly adhering to FAA Part 91 regulations and the International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea. In the Combat Information Center, CIC, of the USS Donald Cook, the screens of the Aegis Combat System Baseline 10 display dozens of green blips, civilian ships and aircraft moving peacefully through the area. Everything is normal, predictable, and completely safe. But this tranquility was about to be shattered. From the horizon, a dark shadow appeared, moving fast and low. It was a Russian Kamov K-27 Helix helicopter with two Isotov TV3-177V turbine engines, each producing two Su-230 horsepower. It was not following normal flight rules. Instead of maintaining a safe distance, the K-27 began circling the Donald Cook, lowering its altitude to just 200 feet, well below the 500-foot safety limit stipulated by the International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO. The Russian helicopter performed exactly 7 circles around the American destroyer, a clear act of provocation. The rules of the game had suddenly changed. At 1700 local time, the tension in the CIC rose another notch. The Russian Ka-27 was not transmitting an identification friend or foe signal. On the Aegis screen, the helicopter's blip turned yellow, signifying an unidentified but potentially dangerous target. Captain Retzlaff, commander of the Donald Cook, picked up the VHF radio microphone. His voice was calm but firm as it rang out over link 16.
Russian helicopter, this is U.S. Navy warship. Your actions are unsafe and unprofessional. Maintain a safe distance.
There was no response. The Ka-27 continued its provocative maneuvers. 40 minutes later, the situation escalated alarmingly. 2 new targets appeared on the radar, approaching from the northeast at extremely high speed. They were 2 Russian Su-24 Fencer attack aircraft. The Su-24M aircraft has a propulsion system consisting of 2 AF turboprop engines, each with a thrust of 11 200 kgf. These aircraft were not just flying around, they were conducting a simulated attack. 11 times the Su-24s streaked past the Donald Cook. They flew at an altitude of only 100 feet above the water at a speed of 500 knots. Each pass created a wake turbulence up to 20 feet high. The closest point of approach CPA was only 50 yards, a dangerously reckless distance. The jet engines produced sonic booms of up to 120 decibels, shaking the entire ship. In the CIC electronic warfare systems confirmed the threat. The AN/SLQ-32 V6 Block 3 ESM system detected Copio radar pulses from a Su-24s locking onto the Donald Cook. They were locking on an action simulating the final step before firing. The Russian radar's X-band frequency of 9 to 10 GHz was recorded in just 1 second. Immediately, this information was shared via the Link 16 network at a data transmission speed of 5 megabits per second to an E-2D Hawkeye early warning aircraft patrolling 100 nautical miles away. All attempts at radio communication in both English and Russian were ignored. The Russians were deliberately testing the limits of the Aegis system. The danger reached its peak in a terrifying moment. As the Su-24 performed its closest pass, the MH-60R helicopter was still hovering on the aft deck connected to the refueling system. The extremely hot exhaust and turbulence from the Su-24's jet engines risked being sucked into the Seahawk's turbine engine. A disaster could have occurred in an instant. Captain Retzlaff did not hesitate.
Seesaw flight ops immediately. All hands to safe havens. Seesaw flight operations immediately. All crew to safe positions.
His voice boomed over the ship's public address system, adhering to Rule 10 of call regs on avoiding collisions at sea. The refueling mission was canceled. The safety of the more than 300 crew members on board was the top priority. In the CIC, the Aegis screen flashed a red alert. Two Su-24 target blips were heading straight for the ship's icon. A warning appeared: high threat, hypersonic ready. Was this just a probe of the Aegis system's air defense capabilities? Or was this a diversionary tactic, a carefully calculated distraction to conceal an even more dangerous threat lurking beneath the waves? A Russian Kilo-class submarine. The U.S. kill chain was activated. A unified multi-domain confrontation was about to unfold, and it would turn the tables spectacularly. The Russians are trying to force the Donald Cook into a mistake, an overconfident reaction, or an exposure of weakness. But inside the CIC, there is no panic, only intense focus. Steady course 270 at 20 knots. Set General Quarters Captain Retzlaff orders. The ship maintains its course and speed, a steadfast fortress in the storm. The battle alarm sounded throughout the ship, but it was a sound of readiness, not fear. At his battle station, the Tactical Action Officer Teo focused intently on the stream of tactical data displayed on the Naval Tactical Data System (NTDS) screen. Contacts non-responsive on all channels, maintaining an active track. At the same time, a raw stream of target data directly from the SPY-6 radar phased arrays was being compressed and transmitted straight to U.S. European Command EUCOM via the Link 16 encrypted channel. The command and control network was fully synchronized. The Aegis Baseline 10 system, the ship's steel brain can simultaneously process 2,000 target tracks. Its computational power is 2,000 times greater than that of the Apollo spacecraft's guidance computer that took humans to the moon. It not only sees what is happening, but also predicts what might happen next, including the trajectories of hypersonic missiles. Amid the storm created by the Russians, this steel brain maintains absolute calm. On the ship's deck, lookouts used FLIR 4K thermal imaging cameras to record every action of the Russian aircraft, gathering irrefutable evidence. The gun mounts of the Phalanx close-in weapon system CIWS, with L-76 barrels measuring 59.8 inches in length and standing 15.5 feet tall, began to move. The second Su-24 began its close approach, approaching from the northeast, still at an altitude of 100 feet and a speed of 500 knots. Its 15-foot wake once again caused the sea to churn. The Phalanx Block 1B+ system automatically locked onto the target. Its Ku-band radar locked onto the Su-24 at a distance of 2.5 nautical miles. With a firing rate of 4 to 5,000 20mm rounds per minute, it could shred any threat in the air. But the objective here was not to destroy. Captain Retzlaff, after a quick consultation with his officers, made a crucial decision based on the rules of engagement. Row E, warning shots authorized. Non-lethal de-escalate, he ordered. Immediately, a Phalanx gun turret swiveled toward the Su-24's flight path. A short burst lasting only 5 seconds was fired. The 20mm rounds were fired into empty space about 1 nautical mile away from the Russian aircraft. This was a strict adherence to the 1972 Agreement on the Prevention of Incidents at Sea NCA No Targeting Only Deterrence. Simultaneously, the SLQ-32 Block 3 electronic warfare system emitted a powerful electronic pulse. This pulse was not a comprehensive jamming action, but a precise electronic attack. It created 100 false targets on the Su-24's Kopyo radar screen, overloading the Russian system and causing it to lose target lock for 10 seconds. The combination of these two actions had an immediate effect. Surprised by the warning shots and the radar system suddenly going blind, the Russian pilot panicked and turned the plane. The Su-24 deviated from its intended flight path by about 20 degrees. Over the Russian internal radio, a panicked pilot reported interference heavy. For the first time, the Russians hesitated. They began to retreat, turning back westward and climbing 300 feet. The impregnable fortress had spoken not with a thunderclap, but with a steel warning. It seemed to be over, but were all these actions in the air just a diversionary tactic to distract from an underwater attack? In the sonar room, the technicians did not relax for a second. The AN/SQQ-89 sonar system's screen displayed sound waves as digital waterfalls. The SQS-53C active sonar system emits acoustic pulses at frequencies of 1 to 10 kHz, scanning the surrounding environment with 50 pings per second. They found nothing. The Baltic Sea, within a 50-mile radius of the Donald Cook, was completely clear of submarines. But preparedness is never wasted. Trailing the ship at a depth of 1,500 feet is the TB-29 passive-towed sonar array, a highly sensitive pair of ears, capable of hearing the sound of cavitation from a submarine's propeller 40 nautical miles away. Accompanying it is the SLQ-25 Nixie torpedo decoy system. This new version is not just a passive decoy. It incorporates an advanced kinematic system to track incoming torpedoes, and more importantly, is connected to the Mk-58 CRAW countermeasure anti-torpedo hard kill system, a type of anti-torpedo torpedo. The silent shadow beneath the water not only listens, it is ready to strike back. After a series of warning shots and electronic shocks, will Russia's Kopyo radar attempt to lock onto the target again? The US SLQ-32 V6 Block 3 system is ready. It can classify an enemy radar pulse in just 1 second based on the characteristics of pulses as short as 0.4 microseconds. All collected signals intelligence (ELINT) is recorded and analyzed. The US Navy does not choose comprehensive jamming. Comprehensive jamming would blind the enemy, but it would also blind itself, making it impossible to know their next move. Instead, the strategy is to render their radar pulses useless by creating 100 false targets. The SLQ-32 forced Russian pilots to face a storm of misinformation, reinforcing the disadvantage created by the warning shots. This ELINT data was immediately transferred to the National Security Agency (NSA) for further analysis, while also updating the SM-6 missiles threat database. The Russians may try to paint targets, but the US has mapped their entire electromagnetic spectrum since 2014, and this 2025 version is an impenetrable, invisible wall. As the Su-24s began their initial retreat, the battle shifted to another domain information. Would Russia attempt to spin the story, claiming they were merely conducting a routine flight? The USS Donald Cook was one step ahead. On Channel 16, Captain Retzlaff's message was repeated clearly and professionally. Russian Federation aircraft, you have conducted unsafe maneuvers with a CPA of less than 500 meters. Warning shots were fired in accordance with international law and standard rules of engagement. Everything was recorded high-definition 1080p video from multiple angles. Audio recordings of radio calls and ELINT data on the warning shots and electronic pulses. Their message was clear. Russia's reckless actions endangered lives. The US Navy acted professionally to deter and de-escalate. Russia's military probe became a global public relations failure. The narrative was controlled. Pixels and evidence won over bullets. After the warning shots and the overwhelming electronic warfare, the Su-24s completely retreated. They did not attempt to change course again. They turned back, maintained a distance of 5 nautical miles, and disappeared to the east. Silence returned to the Baltic Sea, but it was a silence that signified victory. This victory did not come from pulling the trigger on a missile. It came from a deliberate act of inaction. In the CIC, the officers knew they could have easily destroyed both Su-24s, but they chose restraint. They demonstrated that true strength lies not in the ability to destroy, but in the ability to control a chaotic situation and successfully de-escalate. It was a checkmate on the psychological chessboard. Maria. This event was a complete success for the doctrine of multi-domain warfare. For the Russians, it was a reckless act, at 100 feet ending in confusion over electronic jamming and a warning that could not be ignored. For the USS Donald Cook, it was just a normal Tuesday, a routine procedure, but it perfectly demonstrated how the 2025 integrated system turned a threat into a display of superiority through calculated restraint. The lesson from the Baltic Sea is profound. Never challenge a machine that not only follows the rules, but also writes them. If you're interested in in-depth analysis of military technology and global events like this video, and subscribe to receive the next intelligence briefing. Goodbye.